Hi, Lex. Welcome.
Hello,
Welcome to
Anna.
We have worked on many things together in the past almost 2 years now, I think, right? We had a lot of
Yeah,
projects. Yeah, it
yeah,
was very fun. And we share some
yeah.
experiences that are similar, but also not really. And I really wanted to have you here so we can talk about them. And you have
Sure.
a unique knowledge not only of living abroad, staying abroad, but also supporting people on their personal journeys and
Yes.
developing what we called together in our projects this leadership from inside out, which can be, of
Mm.
course, used in the workplace or in the leadership environment, but it is also for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, for us to be
Mm-hmm.
more present in our surrounding. As always, we
Mm-hmm.
start this podcast with this question, with little story that you share about your
Mm.
first experience staying abroad.
Well, yes, first of all, thank you so much. And I'm really happy to be here with you in this podcast. And just a little story about my first experience of really staying and living quite some time abroad, which was the first time I was in UK during my study. So that was the first time, and it really gave me a very different kind of perspective from cultural background as well as the way we connect and interact with people. And my second experience was actually working in Japan at the time because I was working for a consulting firm. And later on in subsequent years, my work also required me to travel a lot in regional projects. I've been thinking about living in different places can be really inspiring as well as give us opportunities and new possibilities. And as a coach as well as a leadership facilitator for around 20 years, I think I've learned a lot from people that I've met, and living and staying abroad also really enhanced my ability to be able, let's say, to be a global citizens, and also to understand what really the difference that make us unique in terms of human being, and what are the voices that is coming out of different places, what are the concerns, what are the collective concerns, needs, consciousness, and so on. So I think one of the most precious experience of living abroad and staying in some countries is really I feel grateful for what I am today and for how I could live. I mean, for myself as well, for my family and for my fellow colleagues. It's wonderful to meet different kinds of people and being able to feel a new home in different places.
Yes, I totally agree. It's this topic that I have been thinking about myself as well, how much we are a collection of our surroundings, of the culture around us, of the people around us. And then
Mm,
when these
mm,
things obviously change in the new context, in the new country, in the new environment, how much of it we still carry with us from our background, from the heritage, from the environment that
mm,
we used to live in, how much we let that go and then adapt to the new place. It's very interesting
mm,
that I haven't been so comfortable describing my identity as Ukrainian only, especially
mm,
after I lived in other places. So I've
mm,
always felt that that word Ukrainian didn't really describe
mm.
well who I was.
Yeah, it's about identity. There are many things or many aspects that we can discuss about adaptations, about how we're seeing ourselves as how we're seeing others. In essence, I would say that we bring everywhere the vibration of ourselves despite the different places we are living. It is so much about the differences, maybe in terms of food, yes, maybe in terms of the way people verbalize or expressing, their feelings and emotions, and how they use that in terms of being able to communicate in a new place. So in terms of the identity, I would say that the uniqueness that we have from our upbringing, from our culture. I think there is something that I would say everyone could retain that. Everyone comes from the background of different colors, but we have the sameness, the commonality as a citizen of the world. In my philosophy is that everywhere I stay, I would like to be able to ask myself, what do I give to this place? How would I be able to make difference to that place? I know it's probably a bit of a rhetorical question, but for me, that is very important. And also to be able to accept people as they are, because sometimes we might have the tendency to reference back to the place that we are coming from. And then we have some comparisons. And I think that sometimes can make us a little bit challenging, as to really feel that the new place is probably the place that we are living as of now, for example. Yeah, but I would say that it depends from person to person. But if you were to ask me, I would say that's what most important for me of living in a new place or living abroad. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. I have 2 points that kind of resonated with me right now. The first one was actually the closest one to the end, was about comparing everything to where you came from. My brother and his
Mm.
wife just moved to Argentina, like literally a few days back.
Wow.
And they will stay there, they will have a baby there, and it's a whole new environment for
Mm.
them. Obviously, it's a new continent, it's different culture.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get there, even though their decision was pretty fast. And
Mm.
now, when we are sharing the messages between ourselves, they all seem to compare what they see right now in this new country to what they
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this looks like
Mm.
this in this place, this looks like that. We would try to get familiar with the new places we're in so
Mm.
then we can feel safer in them. But I also noticed
Yeah.
that because I've lived in other places and I've seen many other places as well, there is
Mm.
kind of more tolerance, if you can say so, or maybe more
Mm.
curiosity to just accepting the place as it is instead of trying to
Mm-hmm.
find a comparison. When they showed like
Mm.
parrots on the trees, I did remember,
Mm.
yes, I saw something like that in Barcelona, but then it's like a whole new thing because parrots as like normal birds in your
Mm.
environment is
Yeah.
not really something that we're used to, and those little things really show how open you are to just perceive how it is
Yeah.
versus how you try to kind of make it similar to what you know.
Yeah, that's lovely of you describing that. And I mean, people moving or probably living in different place for different kind of reasons. It's really a questions that someone need to ask himself about what's really the reason of I'm maybe moving out, I'm moving into a new place or staying in some places. And for me, the practical answers to that it really depends. Are we searching for a new job, for example, for those who are looking for opportunities? Are we living because we have a particular preference or choices of the lifestyle, for example? Is it because of marriage? Someone married to different nationalities, for example, then due
Yeah.
to that kind of assimilations and probably just a considerations, so they move to a new country, for example. Yeah, I think as you mentioned about safety, I think that that is on everyone kind of like the first priority, right? Safety is the first, and probably the second is really about what do they choose to be and to have and to do in different places, because that will give them a clue of how stretched, how flexible they are in terms of adapting, adjusting themselves. I don't like to use the word tolerance because sometimes it can
Hmm.
create a certain kind of association. Maybe adaptations and flexibility, how much they can accommodate in terms of adjusting to the new place. Yeah. Say, for example, if the standard practice, if someone is sick and need to go to hospital, and in a certain country, they might need to go to ER during the off hours, for example. And if you have been living in Japan or probably in Singapore, the standard practice and service of how long do you need to wait, right? It depends on the severity of the cases, of course, but there's a certain standard, and it's quite punctual. And in some country, maybe that is not really. It really depends on the availability of the doctors and so on. So it can come to a point whereby, because of this incident, someone can become disappointed, due to an aspect of health services, or for example. But I would say that look at the overall picture, look at the overall spectrums of why do you choose to be there? Maybe to have a family there, to have colleagues, to have work there. What do you decide to do?
Yeah, totally. Another thing that came up when you were talking about this was actually in relation to something that I also have been discussing online just last week, was about
Mm-hmm.
how much do we adapt to the new place? How much do we let
Mm,
the place change who we are?
mm,
And also how much do we keep ourselves, the way we are? Let's say some easy things like your preferences in food. Again, it's very fresh because my brother is
mm,
sending these videos from the supermarket showing the things that are there, how much, I don't know, wine is now cheaper than beer, and that he wants to try the local wine, which obviously is very, very good. And I was thinking that the habits that you have, let's say eating soup for lunch every day, or like
mm,
some other countries have different dishes, I realized that I tried a lot of things locally when I was living in different places. And then eventually I
mm,
kind of adapted what was local to how I preferred to eat as well. So if, let's say, I wanted certain soups or certain dishes,
mm,
I would create them myself from the products that I have there. And then also
mm.
incorporated some of the things from the local cuisine into my diet because they're good, they're tasty, they're healthy. I mean, also local is very
Yeah.
nurturing as well. It's much better than like looking for fruit which you're used to, but it's not present there. It's not going to be as nutritious as something that is more local. And
Mm,
that's how I see it. In a way, we preserve some of the things that are core to us, our values, but then we also adopt
mhm,
and add to the mix the things that we see are relevant to us and actually give us value. But the thing is that many countries, many cultures, they are maybe more oppressed, or they have a bit of this kind of situations. Let's say my country, or Slavic
mhm.
countries in general, they have a certain reputation, certain stereotypes. Let's say we are people, we are grumpy, we are cold, we drink vodka every day, things like that. So there are certain things that I don't agree with, and I'm not gonna keep that as my
Mm,
identity. But then there will be certain things as you work hard, or you are very welcoming as a guest, as a host in your place. Like you cook for people. This is how we show
yeah,
affection, things like that. The new culture we're in could be completely different.
mm,
And say, if I am really
exactly. Yeah.
scared for my assimilation, for how I am perceived in the country, I can really kind of drop everything that makes me in order to
Mhm,
just be there and be comfortable for someone else. So how do you
mm,
think, from this philosophical point of view, again with your experience also coaching people and helping people find their own voice, is there some kind of
mm,
practice that we can use for this kind of situations where you need to find ways to be there
mm.
present in the new environment, but also hear your own voice?
Yeah, well, that's really lovely questions. I would say that you can understand certain culture from the food, from the way they present the food and use the food as probably an occasion for them to connect with each other, for example. Food, drinks. In other culture, maybe musics and dances, or probably some kind of socializing kind of or something like that. It's also how you can have a sense that in a new place, there's always something that is really differentiating us in terms of how we look, of course. Physically, you might be different from locals, for example. And of course, the way you speak, your pronunciations, and people could notice that. Yeah. from the way you ask questions in the shop, in the grocery, for example, or probably in public places. This is part of what we call adjusting and adopting and maybe assimilating to the new place. Sometimes it might be challenging for some people because there are sensitivity issues around differences, right? And of course, there are some prejudices. We could not avoid that, being not a local. And when you are talking about workplace, for example, people are moving to a new place. One of the things that is big for the person or probably for the family is probably how they can find a work, a job in that new place. And this could be a challenge, because you are with people who have different kind of culture in terms of how do they make a joke, for example. Some jokes might be you might not be able to laugh at the joke and feel a little bit cynical, for example, but for locals might not be, or the other way around. It is a test for us as well, not to take everything with our filter, but it's just let it be and just be a witness. Be witness as if we are noticing, oh, there are differences. And also, sometimes in a new place, it's good that if we have some people whom we are able to connect, and not just only friend, quote unquote, but really someone that we can talk to, and perhaps also have a conversation about understanding what are the differences. Because there are some of the things that we started to understand. Oh, that's how the things work here. And so we know that in a different kind of situation with the similar trends, how are we going to respond? So that the way we respond is really depends on how we interpret of what is coming to us. We need to be a little bit more sensitive about that because our interpretation might be totally different because we bring our own discourse, for example, and yeah, we just allow that. And part of the adopting is actually to learn how people, yeah, make friends, how people connect to each other. All of these things are big things. We do that automatically, but yeah, just feel be open and also talk to people, talk with people, listen to their suggestions and ask questions from curiosity if we don't really understand what's going on. And be open to embrace that.
When you're talking about this, what I'm hearing is it kind of relates to the response and the way that we communicate about ourselves in the world, the way that we accept
Mm,
the situations. It really speaks to me more in terms of some kind of practice that you do for self development, for your
mm,
almost like mindfulness practice. Do you understand what
mm.
I'm talking about? The way that
Yeah.
you described us interacted with this new world, with this external world, was almost like we interact in general with the world
Mm,
when we
mm,
start to learn how to be more present, how to be more mindful, maybe even I don't know certain practice, let's say like Buddhism, right? I started reading the book by Dalai Lama on art of happiness,
mhm,
and it's very interesting
mm,
how the very simple task of acknowledging the emotions and letting go of the ones that create negativity and keeping and
mhm.
cultivating the ones that create positivity. That is kind of the
Yeah,
whole point of the practice, which is very complex. It's very hard to do in the moment. But what you just said kind of brought me to that our internal journey will facilitate this external journey as well.
that's right. Yeah, and it is a biological response actually that we have been inheriting for hundred thousands of years. We've been developed into a human being with the mechanisms of always there is a tendency to detect what are the threats that coming to us, and being in a foreign place sometimes can be felt as a fear or as anxiety. So I think there are some commonalities that everywhere people connecting, and they can use these three words: say sorry, say thank you, and please. Right? But when you don't know about what is going on, sometimes we are hesitating to ask questions because we might fear of rejections. People could not understand us. This is part of transformation as well. That there is a common language of human being, which is to appreciate, to respect, to ask permission, to clarify. And I would say that this is also a part of how we relate to ourselves and how do we relate to others. Yeah. So bringing myself or bringing yourself in a new place and being able to start making connection and making contacts with others and coming from a place of curiosity, reaching out to them with the spirit of, I want to know, I want to learn, and I want to ask this from innocence, not from a place of, I know this must be. That's totally different, you know. So, with that kind of mood, we bring a frame of openness, a frame of holding space for others to maybe to start to notice us differently. It's a bridge started to be formed for others to understand us as well. If that makes sense for you.
Yes, it does. It's so beautiful. I was taking notes because the podcast is about our lessons learned that we share with the audience. And I was taking
Mm,
notes of these lessons that you mentioned. So I'll read them out. The first lesson that we can maybe extract is appreciate, respect,
mm,
ask permission, but also come with curiosity, with innocence that comes from your desire to learn, to not
mm,
assume, and
mhm.
from your openness and open mindedness. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think that will give us something, will open the space to create what is impossible and what is hard to be possibility and to be solved.
Right.
Mm,
Knowing that you have a very rich background working with people on those specific
mhm,
qualities and values, and also knowing that you work a lot on yourself, what are the
mm,
things that you would recommend for us to do, as exercises or the practices, or maybe you can share a bit of your personal stories, like little anecdotes of how these things worked and the results for you, right?
mm.
Again, we're talking about working on ourselves, so then our presence in the world is better.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of chuckle to myself because when I recall in my early days or my early careers, I was trained as an engineer. And as an engineer, the way I was thinking at the time was very linear, like using the computer programming. If X, then Y. So this is like connecting the causality. So these are the causes and these are the effects, right? And throughout the years, I realized that people are not like that. And if I were to use that mechanistic way or linear way of seeing things and perhaps predicting what's going to happen next with that kind of notion, it put me a lot of time at disadvantage. And what I mean is that a disadvantage in terms of my own emotional becoming more reactive and more of like seek refuge for safety and in anxiety because I tried to be safe, and sort of like anticipating what's going to happen next from the fear base. My first cycle was pretty much about marketing in engineering company, chemical companies, and consulting firm. My second round was working with people developers. So that's how I started to not to learn about others, but to learn about myself and to learn about how this, way of me thinking, feeling, and acting, and how my automatic response or somewhat somehow is a reflection of my journey, of my cultural journey, my education, and so on and so on. And I realized that, wow, I choose to let go of things that is not useful to me anymore. Yeah. And I choose things or I choose way of beings and values that will allow me to be expanded in terms of consciousness, in terms of choices. So I think that's maybe a little bit more philosophical, but what I mean is that that was the defining moment when I was able to see myself in the past was more of like, very XYZ. But in that junctions, I started to embrace more of like, it's not XYZ, it's a new possibilities. 1 plus 1 is not always 2. 1 plus 1 could be 3, could be 4, or could be minus. It depends on not the number, but the adding, the process of adding, which is connecting.
So cool. I actually noticed something like this myself. I mean, I don't have the engineering
Yeah.
background, but I
Mm.
was taught about the world being more linear and, if you do this, then this, and there the guarantees, and they started changing, especially as I moved abroad. I had to
Mm.
reinvent the whole thing. You have to reinvent your maybe career because it's, as you said, the most obvious thing that you're looking for, but also who you are and who you are in relation to other people,
Mm.
and also the connections that you build, relationships, friendships. So you start to realize it's like a big, step back for you to see where you are and where you don't want to be. So then I also started noticing more subtle ways that the universe works. That again,
Mm.
it's very
Yeah.
non-linear, and some people can
Mm.
call it quantum, right? So what would be maybe
Yes,
your favorite
exactly.
practice to bring yourself back to this state of appreciating the world the way it is, the way it works, not the way you think it is, not linear. So is there
Mm.
some kind of exercise that we can do?
That's a really lovely questions. I remember one of my teachers said, think about things that you really don't want to do because it's not your being. So a lot of the time we say that, oh, what is our vision? What is our goals and so on? But along the way, we don't think that what we choose not to do. So my practice at the beginning was really, really knowing what I don't want to do. And that is based on certain principles or values and things that coming from my soul calling. The second practice that is very important, we are all energy. And if you see everyone is actually there's a cycle of energy. We use a lots of energy to work, to think, to plan, and to connect with others. So this energy has a certain kind of recovery as well. So it's important for us, when are we going to use and disperse the energy, but when are we going to recover? When are we going to regain the energy? This is like a cycles ups and down. And one of the practice, it might not be working for everyone, but for me, what's working is the practice of really connecting with myself using certain kind of techniques in meditation, as well as some kind of breathing. And also I do stretching, Pilates and yogas. So when I pause that for some reasons, maybe because I'm too busy and so on, I can sense that I'm getting like a little bit off my track, reacting easily and a bit more irritated for some light reasons. Yeah. So I realized that this is like we are just eating and drinking. I'm not talking about hours of practice, just around like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or probably sometime could be 5 minutes, just centering. And this is very crucial for me because it allows me to gain my composure balance and to be able to be not always on the dance, but to be on the balcony of myself and really looking from that perspective with clarity, with conscience.
Those are amazing practices. I also know now, after
Mm,
what is it, almost 4 years of meditating
mm,
regularly. If I don't do
mm,
it, I feel wrong. It's like wrong. It's almost like you're not clean. And now I'm in this stage when I want to. get my health in
Uh,
order, let's say, and I want to have my workout practice a very
mhm.
stable and present thing, because I want to build a habit of doing it nearly every day. And as you said, like, it's been periods of you don't do it, you do it. With COVID, your habits that you had, maybe you were going out somewhere, they change, and you do it at home now. And when I do it at home now, I'm more consistent with it, but it's not been like that before. And I notice how much energy you have. You said it's interesting how sometimes by giving the energy out, you get the energy.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
almost instant. Yes.
It's like the cycle of giving and receiving, as well as the cycle of using and dispersing, as well as recovering and regaining the energy. When you are relieving that, the cycle is becoming continuum, like perpetual. But when you are stopping from that, then it's becoming somewhat is distracted and off track. Yeah.
I think that this could be a nice place to start wrapping it up, because it leaves us with some very practical things that we can do. Sometimes they're really basic things, right? Like very
Hmm.
simple things. They're not easy to do, but they're
Yeah.
very simple. And when
Hmm.
we notice them, when we, approach them from this point of presence, then they might be easier to stick to, right?
Yeah, you're right in pointing out that, because it comes back to what do we broadcast, and that is coming from the integrations of what we think and what we feel. Does it resonate with with your values, your choices? Is it coming from the physical levels, or is it coming from your soul levels? Because soul is actually, they are much more in terms of understanding what do you need. Yeah. So when you integrate all of those elements by having a certain kind of practice, breathing, meditations, it could be music, it could be arts, or whatever match for your preference. But the key here is regularity, and being able to set aside that time, so that we, as you mentioned, we always be present for ourselves, and we tuning to ourselves. So when we connect and relate to us, to ourselves, we can connect and relate to others much better.
Yeah, those are amazing lessons, and thank you so much, Lex, for
You're
sharing
very
them with
welcome.
us. Would you like to add anything in terms of those lessons, or maybe clarify some points?
Yeah, I just would like to say start from something, because this is not a rocket science of what I was talking about. And what we converse is not a rocket science. It's something that is very simple and very modest. Everything can start with our choice of how do we use our time. All right. And I know that we are all very busy. Yeah. But if we can just set aside some time just to be with ourselves in this holding space of silence, and purely like with our breathing, there's a certain kind of process like cleansing and purifications happenings. And when we do that regularly, I think that can help a lot for everyone. I hope that everyone who joined this podcast can really have that, what we call sanctum, a place when we can come back home to our soul and be connected with that.
I love that. The sanctum concept. Very nice. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Lex. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. I feel very
you're very
grounded,
welcome.
very present. I'm sure that it will be helpful for this upcoming week. So thank you. And
Till we
thank
meet
you.
again, Anna.